The old wolf froze, every instinct in his body urging him to walk away. For generations, wolves had driven foxes from their hunting grounds, chasing them from dens, stealing their kills, ensuring that rivals never thrived within their shadow. Yet the sight before him tore at something far deeper than instinct. The tiny fox kits, barely bigger than fallen pine cones, whimpered with desperation, their fur matted with cold and damp earth. Their mother was nowhere in sight, and the sharp tang of blood in the air told the wolf what had happened long before his eyes confirmed it. A hunter's snare had claimed her life. The valley winds carried the bitter scent of decay, a reminder that predators and prey alike could vanish without warning. The wolf, once feared as a pack leader, now wandered alone, his muzzle graying, his steps slower than the eager youth he once led. He had seen too much death to mistake what came next. Without help, the kits would not survive the night. The mountain's chill was descending fast, and the cries of distant owls promised that hungry eyes were already watching. Still, he hesitated. Wolves did not nurture foxes. To take them in was to break every unwritten law of the wild, to risk his own survival for creatures fated to vanish. Yet, as the kits huddled closer, their tiny bodies trembling, something stirred in him, a memory of his own pups, long lost to the unforgiving winters. Their voices echoed in his mind, not unlike these desperate cries. The wolf lowered his head, his breath forming clouds in the frozen dusk. His heart thundered with the weight of decision. Nature demanded he turn away. Destiny dared him to stay. And as the last light of the sun broke through the trees, casting a fiery glow upon his weathered fur, the wolf stepped closer to the hollow. For the first time in his long life, he bent the rules of survival. He curled his body around the frightened fox kits, shielding them with his warmth. Their cries softened into tiny sighs. In that fragile moment, the boundaries between predator and prey began to blur. The first night tested every shred of the wolf's endurance. He remained sleepless, ears pricked, eyes glowing amber in the dark as predators prowled the valley. The kits nestled into his coarse fur, their tiny bodies drawing what warmth they could from his scarred frame. He had fought bears, stalked elk, and challenged rival packs in his prime, but never had he felt so fiercely protective as he did now. With every whimper that escaped the little ones, he pressed closer, silently vowing they would see dawn. Morning came cold and gray. Hunger gnawed at him, and his ribs ached with emptiness. Yet the kits needed more than warmth. They needed food. Reluctantly, he left them hidden in the hollow log, masking their scent with fallen leaves. His legs carried him down to the frozen stream, where fish darted beneath a thin sheet of ice. It was clumsy work. His jaws slammed against the surface, breaking the brittle crust. Hours passed before he managed to drag a single slippery trout onto the bank. It was not enough for himself and the kits, but he carried it back, dropping it gently before their tiny muzzles. The largest kit, fiery-eyed and bold, was the first to taste. He tore eagerly at the flesh, his hunger outweighing his hesitation. The second kit, smaller and cautious, waited until the wolf nudged the fish closer, then nibbled slowly, learning with each tentative bite. The third, the weakest of the three, struggled to chew it all. The wolf, remembering how he once softened meat for his own young, broke the fish apart and placed tender morsels near the little one's mouth. Gradually, the kit accepted the offering, its trembling eased by nourishment and care. Days turned to weeks. The wolf became both guardian and provider, his instincts reshaping into something the wild had never intended. When storms thundered over the mountains, he sheltered the kits beneath his frame, letting them feel his stillness against the chaos outside. When shadows of eagles circled above, he growled low, teaching them that vigilance meant survival. Slowly, they began to mirror his movements. They lifted their heads to sniff the wind when he did. They crouched low when he stilled his body at the scent of danger. Though foxes by birth, they were learning the ways of a wolf. As spring whispered through the forest, the kits grew stronger. Their once fragile steps turned into playful leaps across moss and stone. Yet, it wasn't just strength that set them apart. Something unexplainable had taken root, a bond forged not by blood, but by choice. They were no longer abandoned cubs, and he was no longer a lone wanderer. Together, they were something new, something the mountain had never seen before. By the time the summer sun gilded the valley in gold, the kits had grown into young foxes with lean bodies and restless energy. They darted between trees with playful speed, their tails flashing like streaks of fire. Yet their movements carried a strange rhythm, more measured, more calculating, because they had not only inherited the cunning of foxes, but also the patience of a wolf. When they leapt after grasshoppers or stalked squirrels, their eyes flicked back to the old wolf, watching how he lowered his frame, how he moved with silence that melted into the earth. They copied him, and in their mimicry they learned. The wolf, though weary with age, found purpose in their growth. He no longer roamed aimlessly through the mountains. Each day became a lesson. At dawn, he led them to the stream, showing them how to read the ripples, how to wait for the right moment before striking. At dusk, he guided them to ridges where the wind whispered warnings, teaching them to listen as much as to see. And when night fell, he curled beside them, their playful nips and gentle pawing a reminder that he was not alone. But the mountains are never merciful for long. That autumn, when the first snows dusted the peaks, a new challenge arrived. A rival wolf pack, lean from hunger, crossed into the valley. Their howls shattered the silence, claiming dominance over land that had once belonged to the old wolf's bloodline. He had avoided them for seasons, knowing his strength had waned, but now he was not alone. The foxes, though young, stood at his side, their eyes bright, their bodies tense. The pack descended at twilight, shadows weaving through the pines. The old wolf's heart pounded, knowing the battle ahead was one he could not win by force. Yet something extraordinary happened. As the rival wolves circled, the three foxes moved with uncanny precision. One darted forward, yipping sharply, drawing attention. Another slunk low, weaving behind, distracting their flanks. The smallest, once the weakest kit, mimicked a wolf's deep growl, the sound startling enough to give their elder a moment's advantage. Together, they created chaos, not with strength, but with strategy. The pack, confused by the fox's wolf-like tactics, faltered. The old wolf lunged, his teeth flashing in the snow, striking where hesitation left openings. It was not victory in the traditional sense. The rival wolves did not flee in terror, but they withdrew, wary, unsettled by this strange alliance of predator and prey. When silence returned, the old wolf stood trembling, his breath ragged, yet his eyes shone with pride. The foxes pressed against him, tails wagging, their fur bristling with excitement. For the first time, he understood that his lessons had not only kept them alive, they had changed them. These foxes were no longer bound by the limits of their kind. They had become something in between, heirs to two worlds, the cunning of the fox and the discipline of the wolf. As winter deepened, stories began to spread through the forest. Deer shifted uneasily at rumors of foxes that moved like wolves. Birds carried whispers of red shadows traveling beside the old hunter. And in the hush of snow-laden nights, even the rival pack kept their distance, uncertain of the strange bond that had defied nature's law. The old wolf knew the world had shifted. What began as an act of mercy had grown into a legacy, one that the mountains themselves seemed to acknowledge with every echoing howl under the silver moon. 2 winters passed, and the foxes were no longer fragile creatures scrambling at their guardian's paws. They had grown sleek and strong, their coats burning like embers against the white snow, their eyes sharp with a wisdom rare in their kind. The old wolf, slower now and limping from years of battles, watched with a mixture of pride and sorrow. His time was thinning, like the final stars before dawn. Yet the bond they shared was only deepening. The foxes no longer simply copied his ways. They expanded them. They hunted not with reckless speed, but with patience, cornering prey by reading the wind as he had taught. They moved silently through undergrowth, weaving signals between each other like a hidden language of looks and flicks of tails. Their unity made them something more than foxes, more than wolves. They were a family stitched together by choice rather than blood. But nature rarely allows peace to linger. That spring, the valley faced a danger unlike any the old wolf had ever known. Humans had returned. First came the acrid scent of smoke, drifting through the pines. Then the thunder of axes striking wood. The once quiet ridges filled with echoes of foreign voices, and snares littered the underbrush like invisible teeth. Animals fled from the heart of the valley, their panic carrying whispers of death. The wolf led his foxes away from the worst of it, but his instincts told him this invasion could not be avoided. His fears proved true one evening, when a youngest fox failed to return from scouting run. The old wolf caught the scent of blood and iron in the air, trap metal. His heart pounded as he followed the trail, the other two foxes at his heels. They found him caught in a cruel steel snare, his leg mangled, his cries sharp with pain. The wolf's breath caught in his throat. Memories of the fox kit's mother's fate, of the same merciless contraptions, flashed through his mind. For a heartbeat, despair threatened to paralyze him. But the look in the trapped fox's eyes, full of trust and desperate hope, reignited the fire in his chest. The old wolf lunged, snapping at the trap, his teeth scraping uselessly against metal. The other foxes clawed at the earth, trying to loosen the chain. Hours passed in agony, but the trap would not yield. Night fell, and the forest grew colder. The trapped fox's whimpers weakened. And then it happened. The eldest fox, bold as ever, raised his head and released a sound that sent shivers down the wolf's spine. It was not a fox's yip, nor a wolf's howl. It was something between, something that echoed with strange power through the valley. The second fox joined, their voices weaving together, strange and haunting. Finally, the wolf added his aged howl, his voice deep and ragged. Together, the sound rose into the night, rolling over ridges and rivers like a call to the wild itself. From the darkness, answers came. Birds shrieked and circled overhead, startled from their roosts. Deer stomped nervously in the meadows. And then, miraculously, another sound joined in. The howls of distant wolves, rival or ally, it no longer mattered. Their calls answered, drawn by the strange chorus of wolf and fox united. That distraction bought them what they needed. The forest erupted in noise, unsettling the human camp. Shouts rang out, lights flickered through the trees, and men scattered in confusion. In their haste, they abandoned snares still sprung in the woods. One man, retreating through the dark, tripped over the chain that bound the young fox. The trap jolted free, snapping open just enough. The fox, whimpering, pulled himself free and stumbled into his family's embrace. The old wolf pressed his muzzle against the injured one, his heart heavy with relief. The humans might return, the danger might never vanish. But in that moment, he knew something undeniable. Their unity had saved them, not through teeth or claws, but through a bond so strong it bent the wilderness itself. The mountains had witnessed a miracle, a song born of predator and prey, echoing as one. And though the old wolf's body trembled with age, his spirit blazed brighter than ever. He realized that what began as mercy had become destiny, and destiny had only just begun to unfold. Seasons turned, and the old wolf's pace slowed to a crawl. His muzzle was white as snow, his steps heavy, but his eyes still gleamed with fire each time he watched the foxes race across the ridges. They had grown into guardians of the valley, creatures whispered about by deer, feared by hunters, and respected by rival packs. Where foxes once darted timidly and wolves prowled alone, now moved a family that blurred the line between two worlds. The injured fox, though left with a faint limp, became the most watchful of all. He often lingered beside the old wolf, listening to his steady breaths, as though drawing strength from the heart that had once chosen compassion over law. The others ventured farther, guiding herds away from danger, scattering snares before animals stumbled upon them, and warning the valley with strange cries that carried for miles. One autumn evening, as the first frost painted the grass silver, the old wolf climbed his favorite ridge. The foxes followed, pressing close to his side. Together they looked over the valley that had once been silent with grief, now alive with harmony born of their bond. The wolf lifted his head, and for the last time, he howled. It was a sound filled not with sorrow, but with triumph. The foxes joined in, their voices weaving through his, not fox and not wolf, but something entirely new. When his body finally lay still, the valley mourned in its own way. Ravens circled low, deer gathered watchfully at the tree line, and even rival wolves held their howls longer that night. Yet it was not an end, but a passing of fire. The foxes carried his lessons forward, not as orphans of tragedy, but as heirs to a legacy of unity. Years later, travelers spoke of hearing strange calls in the mountains, haunting, beautiful cries that no single animal could make. They told of red shadows moving with wolf-like patience, of a valley where creatures no longer fled at every rustle, but listened. And though few believed, those who did knew they were hearing a truth older than any law of the wild, that family is not bound by blood, but by the courage to love beyond boundaries. The old wolf had bent the rules of nature. His foxes had broken them. Together, they had rewritten them.